Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's lecture. This is a community health lecture, partnership between the Foothills Branch Library and Midwestern University. Today's lecture is titled Caring for Yourself While Caring for Others, and it's brought to you by Dr. Bhargava. She is an associate professor with Midwestern University in the clinical psychology program, and we are honored and very happy to have her here today. And I'm going to turn the program over to her. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you for having me today.
You're very welcome.
I'm excited to talk to you guys about this topic because I find it's even harder now these days to remind ourselves to take care of ourselves before and while taking care of others. So I'm going to touch upon a few topics here today, and I'm also going to have us do a couple of activities that I think will be helpful and fun to do as we're kind of going through this. So the first thing is I found these pictures online, and I think they're pretty accurate of how I'm feeling, at least, and I'm sure many of you are feeling, in terms of just having multiple roles and trying to figure out how to juggle and how to manage all of these multiple roles that we have now. And I feel like since the pandemic, it's probably increased in terms of just the different roles that we have nowadays. So just take a minute and think about kind of what are what are your thoughts in regards to like these pictures, and just think about your thoughts and feelings as you're kind of thinking about all of the multiple roles that you have. So the first activity is basically take a few minutes, think about the pictures I just showed you, think about your thoughts, feelings, how you kind of, feel when you're pulled in multiple directions, also the thoughts that you may have. Some of the common feelings that you may have kind of thought of as well is just feeling anxious, maybe a little bit of like anger in there. You might be like trying to cry out for help, but don't really know who to go to or who to talk to. You might be feeling overwhelmed with a bit of sadness. And especially when we were on lockdown, you might have felt isolated, even though you may have been in a house full of like with your children or maybe your spouse or whoever else, but there's still some isolation that occurs in those situations. Exhaustion is a big one, right? If just feeling exhausted overall, never being able to kind of catch up, feeling like you have time to do anything for yourself. Maybe a little bit of guilt is in there, and maybe feelings of just, feeling hopeless. Some of the common thoughts you might be having is like, if I don't do it, no one will. No one else can do it like I do it. I can't trust anyone else to get it done. I can't say no, or I don't know how to say no. And that often is a big problem for some people, is just like you just keep saying yes because you just don't know how to say no. And it's really common to be in that situation. These are a little bit more specific in terms of maybe during the pandemic, or just specific to people that are caring for their parents. It's like, I'm responsible for my parents' health, or maybe you promised your mother or father that you would take care of the other one, and so you're kind of stuck in that situation of like, well, I promised my father I would always take care of my mother, and so now it's like, okay, like now you have that added like stress on you to take care of the other parent. So with all of these thoughts and feelings, we often kind of think about like, what do I do? Because you start to feel maybe a sense of burnout, or compassion fatigue can also set in. Burnout is just the exhaustion of physical or emotional strength or motivation, usually as a result of prolonged stress or frustration. And this is a sense of like, you're just going about your day, but it's kind of like on repeat, right? You wake up, you do the same thing every day, and then you go to bed, wake up, do the same thing, and you find like, like after a while, you're just like, I can't do this anymore. Like something has to give. Compassion fatigue is a little bit different in the sense that you do still have that condition characterized by emotional and physical exhaustion, but you also start taking on the emotional burden of an individual that's suffering. So you start to take on the feelings, the thoughts of that other person. And this could lead to, of course, a decreased ability to empathize or feel compassion for others. So you start maybe feeling like irritated. You start feeling like, I don't really want to do this anymore. I don't want to take care of this person anymore. At times, compassion fatigue has been referred to as secondary traumatic stress if it reaches up to the point of where it's like prolonged, so happening for a certain amount of time, and if it's pretty severe. So if you've been taking care of someone for a prolonged amount of time and you're just feeling more kind of exhaustion and just I would say you feel burned out, but it's a different feeling of burnout. It's like a little bit more severe case of where you're just not able to do that role anymore. So what do we kind of look for in symptoms to kind of classify burnout and then also compassion fatigue? Again, I've mentioned just that chronic physical and emotional exhaustion, and that's just like where you're not sleeping well. Even if you get like 5, 6, 7 hours of sleep, when you wake up, you're just not feeling good. Like you're still exhausted. You can have ill feelings towards the caregiver relationship. So a loving relationship that used to exist is now filled with just irritation. You snap back at the individual. You don't care for them like you used to. So those are definite signs that are leading from like burnout to compassion fatigue. Again, the irritability is there. There's feelings of self-contempt. As I said, difficulty sleeping. So even if, you know, as I said, if you're getting like 5 or 6 hours of sleep, which is not a lot, but it's, you know, usually people can function on it. But if it's not like a good deep sleep, then you are going to be waking up exhausted. Or you might just have sleep deprivation where you're just not able to fall asleep. You're not able to sleep for, you know, like maybe more than an hour or two at night. There could also be weight loss or weight gain associated with this, and it just really depends on what your eating habits are. I know when I'm stressed or when I'm like, you know, kind of juggling a lot of stuff, I don't tend to eat a lot. So I might lose weight, but not like in a healthy way. Or I know some people like are stress eaters, so they might gain weight. So it just really depends on kind of what your eating habits are and how you handle stress. Also, in terms of just physical symptoms, you might have headaches, and that too. Also, it depends on how kind of stress affects your body. So you might have headaches, stomach aches, just physical pains all over your body. And then furthermore, you might have poor job satisfaction because you feel pulled in so many different directions. Like you're caring for your parents, you're doing like housework stuff, you're doing maybe schoolwork stuff with your kids, and now your job is there too, and like you have a full-time job, so who's going to do that? So there's like, this all could lead to poor job satisfaction as well. There's also a failure to exercise, which might be impacted because, you know, when you're pulled in so many directions, right, like who has time to go exercise? So that might be something that kind of falls off, you know, just falls out of the wagon kind of thing in terms of not having time to do it. So what can we do to kind of help ourselves out in this? I love this quote. It says, taking care of yourself doesn't mean me first, it means me too. And I think that's something really important for us to remember is just, even though we're gonna put ourselves and try to do something for ourselves, it doesn't mean like we're neglecting other parts of our lives or neglecting the people that we need to take care of. We're just incorporating ourselves in the care that we're giving to everybody else, we're caring for ourselves too. So I think that's something really important for us to remember. Um, Definitely things that we can start doing is, I feel like self-monitoring and self-awareness kind of go hand in hand in terms of just being aware of what are my thoughts, what are my feelings, how am I feeling today physically, how am I feeling, like do I have body aches, do I feel tired, do I feel exhausted, why do I feel this way, and kind of really truly identifying like what are the things that are causing you to feel this way. The biggest thing we can do for ourselves is engaging in self-care. And I know it's easier said than done. So I'm going to try to give you some tips on how to incorporate self-care. Even if it's just 5 minutes a day, it's better than nothing at all. So self-care is definitely a practice. It is engaging in health-related activities, using health-promoting and desired behaviors, and it's overall where we're trying to adopt, right, a healthier lifestyle and enhance wellness. So there's different things that one can do to kind of incorporate and look at their overall self-care. I'm going to talk about some tips, but I really like this integrated health and wellness assessment wheel. I like it because it does give us kind of like a holistic perspective on ourselves and just like the different kind of facets of what makes us who we are. Um, and I like it in the sense of that it covers so many different areas. So we can look at life balance and satisfaction, your spiritual sense, your physical nutrition, exercise and weight, um, health responsibility, right? So it looks at like a lot of different factors that make us a whole. And so when we're trying to look at, self-care, coping strategies, we might say to ourselves, I feel like I have a pretty good relationship with my spouse. So I think like relationships are pretty good, but you know what? Like I really feel like I'm not doing well physically. Like I could probably maybe like eat healthier, lose a few pounds, maybe exercise more, things like that. So you might find that, okay, like one area you're doing really well in, but maybe there's a couple areas that you may feel like, if I spend a little bit more time in those, I might start to feel a little bit better. So as we're kind of talking about self-care and coming up with a plan, just remember this kind of wheel and think about what areas do you think just initially that you can kind of maybe make better. So I added in a self-care quiz and I'm hoping here that it works. It's relatively short. It's not meant to diagnose anything. It's just a fun quiz that I sometimes like to take and just see kind of where I'm at in my self-care, and kind of like the tools that I'm using, if they're effective or not, and things like that. So I'm gonna have you guys do it here in a second, and I'll pull it up and see if, let me see if I can get it to work. Hold on, let's see. So if you have paper and a pen or a pencil, it's just loading up, I think. Let's see. Okay, here we go. So I think this is, yeah. Okay, so go ahead and take this. Basically, what we're gonna do is you're gonna end up tallying your A responses versus your B responses. Okay, so I'll give you a minute or a few minutes to kind of just go through it, and then we'll move on from here. I'll just give you another maybe minute or so. It's relatively short. Okay, so I'm gonna just scroll down. So you should have a total for A responses and a total for B responses. Okay, so according to this, to the thing here, the self-assessment results. So go ahead and see if you have mostly A's, some B's, or mostly B's. Now it says here, if you have mostly A's, then you're doing pretty good with your self-care strategies. If you have some A's, some B's, you've got a good start to self-care, but there's always room to improve. If you got mostly B's, then it says it is time to get started on some self-care practices. Now, again, this is just a really, really quick little self-care quiz here, just to kind of give us an idea of where you're at in terms of your self-care practices. If you look on the internet, there are tons and tons of these kind of quizzes, and there are some that even break it down into different sections of like what we talked about previously on this integrated health and wellness assessment. So it would say, oh, like it looks like, you know, your strengths are in relationships. Maybe you do have that like really strong spiritual relationship with God, but it does look like you're needing to add in some exercise routine or something like that. So there's tons of these kind of quizzes online if you're interested in taking them and kind of want to see where you fall in like the different areas. But it just kind of gives us a brief idea of how we're doing overall in terms of self-care. Okay. So another part of kind of coming up and talking about self-care is that many people do have these common questions of like, do you think, you know, you're being selfish if you put your needs first? Is it frightening to do things on your, is it frightening to, hold on, I think I have a typo in there. Is it frightening to think of your own needs? It's supposed to say think. What is the fear about? And then also, do you have trouble asking for what you need? So do you feel inadequate if you ask for help? Many times people say, how can I take care of myself when I have so many things on my plate already? I don't have any time at all day because every hour is planned for. These are common things that I hear and common things that a lot of people are facing is that it's so easy to talk about self-care, right? But it's so hard for some to actually implement it. And it's even harder to implement if you have feelings or a sense of guilt of like, well, you know, if I take 5, 10, 20 an hour, you know, whatever it is, like away from my mom or from the kids or from work, like things are going to fall apart. It's not going to work out. I can't do this. And you just start kind of talking yourself out of it. But it's really, really important to try to develop a plan for doing some kind of self-care because it is going to help you out in ways that you know you can't really imagine right now. But even giving yourself 5 or 10 minutes a day to just sit, breathe. If you're into meditation, meditate. If you're into mindfulness, you can practice mindfulness. But even if you just do it for a few minutes a day, it works wonders. So the principles of self-care are to definitely develop a plan for doing your work um, in a way that's restorative, mindful, wholesome, and healthy. You do want to set your limits with compassion in terms of, you know, how much you're going to do, how much really it's like what are your expectations, right? So you don't want to say your expectations up so high where you fail. Like, I know that probably in any given day, maybe I'll have like 30 minutes. And if it's a great day, maybe I'll have an hour to myself. Um, so I know not to plan like a whole movie to watch, because then I'll only be disappointed that I can't do it. So even if I might say, okay, like, let me just read a chapter of this book, and it takes 15 minutes. So that's great. At least I got that in. But you do want to set up a schedule that's doable, where you're not going to feel like a failure engaging in self care. Also, know which activities refresh you. Just because, like, your friend might really like to get massages, or they may really like to get coffee on their own, that doesn't mean that would work for you. You really have to do things that you find are restorative for yourself. So in order to make a plan for self-care, we're so used to making plans for everybody else, right? We schedule things out for, maybe your parents or whoever you're taking care of. You plan things out for your kids, your spouse, whoever it is. But you have to make a plan for yourself in terms of self-care. And decide who's gonna be part of your self-care. If there's people that you want to be part of your self-care, without a plan, self-care does remain a really low priority, and it rarely does happen if you don't make a plan. The other key part is that consistency is so important. You can't really engage in self-care if you're not consistent with it, especially if you're going to engage in like deep breathing exercises, mindfulness, meditation. I know, like, sometimes people try those kind of things and they're like, well, it didn't really work. And then I ask, well, okay, how long did you try it for? Were you pretty consistent? And they're like, no, I tried it for a day and it didn't help me. Those kind of things you have to practice every day, and they have to be part of your routine in order for you to see a benefit. And if you can't commit to that, that's okay. Then that's not what you're meant to do at this point in time. Like, maybe, substitute it for something else that doesn't require that sense of consistency. So some ideas for self-care: massage. I think I mentioned massage before. Exercise, nutrition, arts, crafts, anything like that. Um, maybe create a way to like support some time off if you can go on a vacation. Um, learn and use stress reduction techniques, and we'll talk about some of those. If there's a way to incorporate getting proper rest and nutrition, that's great. Eat, exercise regularly. It says here, even for just 10 minutes. Now the weather is so nice outside, so even just taking a 10-minute walk, could be great for you. Read a book, take a bath. You can also talk to a friend, family member. I know during this time, it's kind of hard to reach out to people, but there's safe ways to do so. And so I would say, like, if you are missing that kind of social aspect of life, then definitely reaching out to friends and family through Zoom or meeting up, but still maintaining the safety protocols is super important. Okay, so some of the relaxation strategies, there's mindfulness, and this is the practice of being present in the moment. An example is mindfulness walking, and I don't know if any of you have tried this, but when you're out for a walk, and not having a phone on you, not listening to music, but just kind of going for a walk and listening to the sounds that you hear, feeling the ground beneath your feet, um, kind of feeling what the weather is like, just being aware of each step. You can also be aware of the smell in the air, aware of your surroundings. That's being mindful while you're walking. So you're really paying attention to the walk itself and your surrounding areas. You can do that even if you have company. So even if someone wants to go with you, that's okay, or you can just do it on your own. But there's also like things like mindful eating. So for example, just being very aware of what you're eating, what it tastes like, what the first bite tastes like, what it feels like in your mouth. All of those things it's just being present in the moment. And I think it's so hard for some people to just be present, right? Where you're not on your phone, you're not answering texts, you're not checking Facebook, you're not doing whatever, or if you're even like you're not watching TV or whatever it may be, but just being present in that moment is super, super calming, and it just kind of brings you back to that place of just calmness. There's also deep breathing, and this is breathing with long breaths, and it's really paying attention and counting the number of inhales and exhales that you take. One example that I use is like when you're baking cookies, right? And that initial smell that people take, right? You go like you smell the cookie and you take this like deep breath in. And that's kind of like what they're talking about in terms of like taking the long, deep breath in, and then you do the same when you're exhaling. So some people like to have counts of 3, some people like counts of 5, whatever you're really comfortable with and whatever kind of helps. But sitting there deep breathing for, even if it's like 3 to 5 minutes, and just sitting there doing that is very helpful as well. Some people really like progressive muscle relaxation, and this is something that can be found on the internet as well. Like all of these things can be found. If you just Google exercises, things like that, you can find different examples of all of these things. But progressive muscle relaxation is really based upon the practice of tensing or tightening one muscle group at a time, followed by a relaxation technique. So you basically, or you could be sitting in a chair and you can just if you're closing your eyes, you like tighten up your shoulders, and then, you can tighten them up for like maybe a few seconds and then kind of release them. And then you move all the way down to your fingertips, and then you can move all the way down to your toes. It's a very useful, again, it's a useful relaxation technique. And you would do that for about 10 minutes a day, and you can even do it in the morning, afternoon, evening, whatever it may be, and however many times it kind of helps you. Again, these are all just samples of relaxation strategies. There are many more that people talk about, and if you're interested in getting more information about this, you can definitely there's books on relaxation strategies. Again, I mentioned looking on the internet for examples. Even like YouTube has great videos on some of this stuff as well that you can just play and follow along. Okay, so here we go, a YouTube video, and we're actually gonna practice this. It's since I have you all captive right now and you're not hopefully running off to your next thing just yet, is to take 5 minutes to brainstorm things that can be done to alleviate stress, and maybe come up with like one healthy behavior that you would like to add to your, to your day. And it might take you a little bit of time to do this, but I think it's good for us to just kind of use the time available to really just kind of sit and take the time to figure out like what can we do, and kind of where in our schedule can we fit it in. And maybe it's in the morning, maybe it's in the afternoon, and maybe it's in the evening before bedtime. But I can take questions now too if there's any questions.
Dr. Bargava?
Mhm.
Hi. I don't want to interrupt the brainstorming too much, but one of the participants wanted to know if you could make your PowerPoint slides available to participants after this lecture is over. There's a lot of great information, and some folks want to go back and access this information later. Do you think you could make your PowerPoint slides available for participants to
Yeah,
view later on?
that would
Yeah,
be fine.
okay. So Dr. Bargava, another question just came in. Let me read this question. The question is, any suggestions for alleviating the guilt of not being able to speak to, check in on my mother daily? She is a widow, lives alone nearby, but sometimes I just run out of time to even pick up the phone and call her.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and I think one of the things that makes it so hard for us to deal with um, the ability to handle everything is just this guilt, right? Is like something has to give on some days, and I think just telling yourself and reminding yourself that it's okay. It's okay that you don't get to everything on your list. And if you check in with your mom every other day or every third day, then that should be fine. And, maybe even just tell her and remind yourself, if she needs you, she can always call you as well. So if there's like an emergency or something like that, just remind her and say, like if you need me, I will definitely be there, but there's certain days that I can't kind of contact you every day. So maybe, having that as a reminder for her and you, that might help. I know this format is a little bit different. Usually I would call in a couple people and see if, if you wanted to share your brainstorming activity, or, if you have a difficult time incorporating self-care into your day, or even if you found effective ways to incorporate self-care in your day, kind of what would those be like. But If anybody wants to share, I think we can find a way to do that,
Mhm.
or you can put it in the chat box. But um,
Sure, you can share them via chat. That would be fantastic.
yeah,
You know, being a librarian, it's funny because people often think, you know, librarians read all the time, and it's something that I enjoy, and it's something that gives me a great deal of relaxation, but it's hard to carve out the time in the day to actually do that. But it's one of the things that gives me, you know, a great sense of peace and relaxation when I am able to do that. And so that's something that, you know, personally, I'd like to add to my life to make sure I carve out the time to, uh, you know, enjoy that kind of uh, a time just for me. So that's,
mhm,
you know, my personal take on that. And also exercise. You know,
mhm.
physical exercise is uh, such a beneficial way to spend some time. And just like reading, it's hard sometimes to find the time to do that. So those are two things that I want to definitely schedule in to help cope with, you know, stress and especially during these times of during the pandemic.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, for sure.
So somebody suggested or wanted to share that it was the same person that had the question about checking in on the mother. This person said that they want to make time to add walking back into my daily routine.
Hmm.
So it's you know, and you can walk for exercise, but also, you know, maybe make it a meditative walk like you were describing earlier.
Yeah,
Hmm.
right. Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, just incorporating something like that every day will, I think, will be great. Mm. Yeah, and it's interesting. I mean, I talk to my clients about this all the time, right? About like self-care. And then I often have to remind myself too, right? Like, okay, I have to incorporate self-care into my daily life. Because I do think people often forget about self-care and caring for yourself during the day. So, you know, if you're in that boat of, you know, how do I incorporate this, or where do I find the time? Like, just really just try to carve out like 5 or 10 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be a lot. If you enjoyed that video that I showed, you saw how quick that was, but yet just sitting there for 5 minutes, listening to someone, just like taking time to relax, like that, you know, may help.
Mhm. Well, it certainly helped me. I really enjoyed that video.
Yeah.
Somebody else just wanted to thank you very much. This participant has a daughter who is an adult with special needs, and I think she really appreciated some of these tips, some of the self-assessment tools that you suggested, and some of the coping strategies that you brought up. So kind of felt the same way that I do that. You know, the ideas that you presented here are very helpful, not just for when we're dealing with COVID, but for life in general, really.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Certainly.
It's a bit more amped up right now, but yes, just in general life, this can be very helpful.
Hmm. So, are there any more comments or questions out there for Dr. Bargava? I don't see any other questions or comments here. Did you want to wrap things up? I didn't want to assume that this was the conclusion of your lecture. Or,
No, yes, I'm done. So if there's anything else um, from the participants, but I covered everything.
okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been such a uh, useful, uh, personally speaking, a useful presentation. I got a lot out of it, and I like the assessment quiz that you
Yeah,
provided. And I thought personally that the holistic diagram, the circle with the different slices in it,
yeah,
where you can make sure you're addressing all those different areas of your life, was particularly useful and from a personal perspective, I'm going to try to incorporate some of these ideas and strategies into my life. And we really appreciate you sharing these ideas and sharing your expertise with the community. And I think that all the participants would feel the same. So Dr. Bhargava is going to make the PowerPoint slides that she used in this presentation available to me. I will certainly email them to everybody that signed up for the lecture today. This lecture was recorded, and so once it passes through the library channels, it'll be posted on the library website. And so everybody will be able to access this and maybe share it with friends who weren't able to make it to the presentation today. So when that video becomes available, I'll also let people know that they can access that on the library website, and I'll give instructions as to where it can be found on the website. So thank you to everybody for participating. When I reach out with the PowerPoint slides, I'll also let you know when the next community health lecture is, so you can join us back for the next one. And hope everybody takes care of themselves. And we thank you again, Dr. Bhargava, for your excellent presentation. And I'm gonna close this out. So goodbye to everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.